The more connected fans feel to their sports teams, the more likely they are to invest in it, whether it's tickets, gear, or souvenirs. Engage with fans by asking for their input on team decisions by getting a .vote team website. Visit GoDaddy.com today to get started.
Jalen Brunson is the closer, the Knicks in 6, and Bill Belichick is a giant weirdo. That and a whole lot more on the latest edition of Gordon Damer on Sports. Yes. Welcome in episode 3. You know it. It's Gordon Damer on Sports. Please hit all the buttons you possibly can. But let's get right into it. We're going to talk some boxing today with our pal Justin Shackil from DAZN about the big weekend in boxing with Canelo Alvarez stepping back in the ring. Who the heck is William Skull and the boxing landscape, what it looks like. We'll talk some Yankee stuff with Justin for sure. We'll also get into Bill Belichick and that interview that everybody is still talking about days later. We got 3 and out and a whole lot more. But we start today with the headline. The Knicks survive and advance. You know that survive and advance is the unofficial motto of March Madness for the Knicks. It also works in May. I'm recording this right after the Knicks came back from the dead to win Game 6 against the Pistons, close out that series in Detroit, 116-113. And man, I mean, what more can you possibly say about Jalen Brunson? As you've probably seen by now, hits the game winner, 4 seconds to go. Pistons fumble away their last chance. They might not ever win another home playoff game after blowing a 7-point lead with 2.5 to go. But I don't know what more can be possibly said about Jalen Brunson that's not already been said. It feels like all the adjectives are taken. He's been doing this now 3 years in a row in the playoffs, in the regular season too, but he steps up in the biggest moments and keeps getting it done. It was the most predictable game winner really you could ever see. Knicks with a chance to win a playoff game, tie game, closing seconds. They can close out the series. Who do you think is going to get the shot? I don't know where Asar Thompson was going, but of course it was Brunson. He finished with 40. Of course he did. You know, when the NBA announced that Jalen Brunson won the Clutch Player of the Year award, I got to be honest, I don't think I had ever heard of that award before. But man, this guy, since he got to New York, has been the man. I'm sure all those YouTube compilation videos of all the talking heads ragging on the Knicks for signing Jalen Brunson, they're about to get 1 billion more views over the next few days because this guy just continues to deliver. And let's be honest, when the Pistons made their comeback in the fourth quarter, Brunson missed a ton of shots. Seemed like he might be kind of out of gas. That's what I thought at the time. And just when you were getting ready for a possible Game 7 back in New York and no one else was doing anything, that's the moment that Jalen Brunson comes up with the biggest performance. It's just an incredible performance from him. Some incredible shots over those last 2.5, 3 minutes. Now, I don't know if it's great for the long-term prospects that the only guy who can get things done is Brunson, but he got it done. And that's really, in this moment, all that matters. Now, if you're a Knicks fan, you can't get too carried away. This Knicks team was not built simply to beat the Pistons. This team was not built to simply win a first-round playoff series and in an absolute war, no less. But Knicks fans, I would say take a day. Take 2 days to enjoy this. Give yourself 2 days after not having anything remotely to enjoy at this time of year for almost 2 decades. You know, they say you have to live in the present to have peace in life. If you live in the past, you're depressed. If you live in the future, you have anxiety. I would say, Knicks fans, especially for you, live in the present. Give yourself a day or two to enjoy this, at least until the Celtics series starts, because that's not going to be pretty. But you know what is pretty? Jalen Brunson and Tom Thibodeau can avoid printing resumes, at least for now, and Knicks fans can at least exhale for a minute or two. And then there is the story of the week, which just keeps on giving, which of course is Bill Belichick. What on earth happened to Bill Belichick? How did we go from hooded genius, Super Bowl champ, to Instagram soft launch guy? Now, look, let me be clear. I never cared about this story. I didn't seek it out. I saw the headlines, what to know about Bill Belichick and his 24-year-old girlfriend. And I thought, need to know? There's nothing I need to know. But then, of course, CBS Sunday Morning aired that puff piece. And that's what it was. CBS Sunday Morning is not 60 Minutes. They're not going after people. So when you see that interview get derailed like it did, I, like most of us, couldn't look away. And not because it was fascinating or interesting, because it was cringe, because it was awkward, and honestly, kind of gross. My first thing is, who is looking for this type of content? The fact that they are so followed on Instagram and social media, clearly people are following. I get that. And I get maybe you followed him because when he first signed up, you thought, I'm a Patriots fan or I'm a football fan. Never in a million years did you think it's going to devolve into this. But who is following her? Why are you following her? But she's not really the focus here. The focus is Bill Belichick, Mr. No Days Off, the guy who fined players for not properly logging their reps in a practice sheet, Mr. Buttoned Up football coach, attention to detail guy. And now he's giving interviews in distressed designer sweatshirts, pretending that it's something he's worn since the aughts. Bill, come on. That sweatshirt is as fake as this relationship that you're pushing. And if that sweatshirt is legitimately torn because of so much use, that sweatshirt is older than your current girlfriend. But this story isn't about the relationship. It's about reputation, because Bill Belichick is the head coach at North Carolina. It's about perception, because for 20 years, Bill would have you believe he didn't care about optics. He sold us on, I don't care what you think. And now here he is, front and center in a story that looks like it belongs on the Real Housewives, more so than inside the NFL. I fully expect this to be a storyline on the next season of White Lotus, and it's all about him and her trying to control the narrative. And let's not kid ourselves. This story, while it has started, it is nowhere close to being over, because TMZ is circling and Daily Mail is already running headlines about her real estate portfolio and asking, wait a second, how did they meet again? This story was always weird, but it was kind of an acceptable level of weird when we didn't know her name, only that Bill Belichick is dating this 24-year-old. Now it's way past weird, and the TMZs and the tabloids of the world, they are not going away. You can't constantly be craving attention and playing the fame game and then get all shocked when people want to know about the thing everyone's talking about, which is obviously your relationship. Well, I only want to talk about the book. She's in the book. You apparently put her in the book. You refer to her as your creative muse. And plenty of legends have bad endings. I'm not saying that this is going to completely alter what Bill Belichick's reputation or history is, but this isn't just embarrassing, it's distracting. There's already a report that UNC football, the program that just hired him, has spent all this time dealing with issues surrounding her, and that's a bad headline in April or May. If it's still a story come September, he is toast. He is representing a university, and if he wins games, no one is going to care. But he doesn't play a game for another 4 months. This is a guy who used to rip players for bringing drama. Now he is the drama. He is clearly a punchline. Bill Belichick has allowed himself to become a laughingstock. Anyone who looks or reads about this story in any way comes to the same conclusion. Look, these kind of relationships always come across as nakedly transactional, right? He gets to be with a pretty young woman and she gets to be rich and famous, which apparently is something she's been doing for a while. So I'm not going to throw out the term elder abuse like some have, but if you're North Carolina, you've got to be wondering, what the heck did we get ourselves into? You thought you were hiring football royalty, but the ultimate buttoned up guy, attention to detail guy. The last thing you thought you were getting was going to be tabloid content, Instagram drama. So now the countdown is on. September cannot get here soon enough because, again, if Bill Belichick as head coach of North Carolina wins, this will become background noise. If they lose, the circus will be leaving town very fast. So it's bad enough he's embarrassed himself already. If he's embarrassing his employer, that's a completely different thing. All right, we're joined now by Justin Shackil. You see him all over the place with the Yankees, but he's also my guy to break down all the boxing with a busy boxing weekend with all his play-by-play stuff on DAZN. Justin, you can find on Twitter at Justin Shackil, and he joins us now. Justin, man, thanks for giving us a few minutes.
Gordon, always looking forward to talking to you. I appreciate you having me, man.
All right, so as a complete casual into boxing, I love a big event. Who the heck is William Skull?
Well, Hold on, let's start from the beginning, because if you like big events, you are going to love this weekend. You might be overloaded by what this weekend brings. So this is a very unique weekend in boxing. Friday night, Times Square, New York City. Yes, there's going to be a boxing ring in Times Square. So you have three very competitive and compelling matchups taking place in the middle of Times Square in New York City, one of the more unique settings that you'll ever have a boxing event. What it actually is going to look like, I think, adds to the intrigue, because nobody knows, and we're not going to know until the actual matches take place. So that's happening on Friday night in New York City, with names like Ryan Garcia and Devin Haney and Teofimo Lopez and Arnold Barbosa. Then you fast forward to Saturday night, Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, and this is where William Skull comes in. He is the defending IBF super middleweight champion of the world. He will be the opponent for one Saul Canelo Alvarez, who is still the cash cow in the sport of boxing. He may have slipped down the pound for pound list in recent years. He's going to be 35 in July, but bottom line, Canelo still sells. And what's intriguing about this is going to be the first time that Canelo Alvarez has ever ventured outside of North America in a pro boxing match. He has over 60 plus pro fights under his belt. Yes, he's accomplished so much. He's already been undisputed at 168 pounds. William Skull presents an opponent where if Canelo wins, he wins back his IBF super middleweight championship, so he becomes undisputed again. And a lot of boxing these days is all about what lies ahead. And this is all leading into a September showdown between Canelo Alvarez and Terrence Bud Crawford, who is a top 3 pound for pound fighter in the U.S. It's the biggest kept secret in boxing that will take place later on in 2025, probably in September at the Raiders Stadium in Las Vegas, Allegiant Stadium. That's a long-winded answer to explain who William Skull is and how he factors into this weekend. But yes, he is the opponent of one Canelo Alvarez. And then on Sunday, Gordon, you have the Japanese phenom Naoya Inoue returning to fight in the U.S. for the first time since 2021. He is regarded by many as the pound-for-pound king in the world. He is probably just as popular as Shohei Ohtani in Japan, and he's going to be fighting stateside in Las Vegas. That's on Sunday. So a very, very unique weekend for the sport of boxing.
Cinco de Mayo always seems to be that big weekend in boxing, and it certainly is again this year. With the Canelo fight, is there any threat level that Skull possesses here outside of just a puncher's chance?
Exactly. You phrased it perfectly at the end, a puncher's chance. You know, Buster Douglas versus Mike Tyson type of stuff. No, he doesn't. And I think, look, there's so much to gain here from Canelo. He can win back that IBF title. He'd become undisputed again. It's, basically clinical at this point for him. It sets up, like I said, the Crawford match. It adds more to the line for that fight in Crawford with Crawford. And it also provides the high chance of Canelo Alvarez putting on a show in Saudi Arabia. And that has become a hotbed for boxing over the last 2 years or so. So will that fight go to the judges' scorecards? Probably not. And that means there's a high chance of a big time impressive and nice looking Canelo stoppage.
Canelo's what, 34 now?
Yes, he's going to be 35 in July.
Has he shown any slippage in the last few fights?
I think it's kind of tough to gauge because of the caliber of opponent. Since he fought Dimitri Bivol, and again, this is when he dared to be great, going up to a weight class at 175 pounds that a lot of people felt like he wasn't right for. He lost to Bivol, who's a great pound-for-pound fighter as well, top 10 pound-for-pound fighter. That took place in May of 2022. Since then, you've had the third fight in the trilogy with Gennady Golovkin, which probably came 2 years too late. You had him fight an Englishman by the name of John Ryder in Guadalajara in his home state of Mexico. And then a fight with Jamel Charlo, Jaime Munguia, and Edgar Berlanga. The last 3 or 4 names that I've rattled off, the boxing community just hasn't been impressed. Now, it's twofold. Look, he's he's in his mid-30s. He has accomplished everything that you can accomplish. His legacy is secure. Nothing that will transpire from this day forth will have an impact on the legacy of Canelo Alvarez. So if the focus now is to, win as many belts while making the most money as possible, it's tough to fault the way that Canelo is going. But the opponents, I think, in the eyes of many, could be better. And I think what was once looked at as a far-fetched matchup between he and Terrence Crawford, just because there's such a wide weight disparity, over the last year or so, that matchup's become juicier and juicier. And now people have kind of forced themselves into believing that this is going to be highly competitive. And I think it will be, because that's how good Terrence Crawford is. But it's going to be far greater of a matchup compared to the last 3, 4, 5 opponents that Canelo Alvarez has faced. So, all that being said, he is still right in there in the top 10 pound for pound list. He just isn't at the top anymore.
So Canelo and Crawford is definitely happening in September.
As long as he gets through one Williams skull on Saturday.
Look, Justin, if it doesn't happen, I'm blaming you. I know that's probably not fair, but I'm blaming you anyway.
I'll take it.
All right. I wanted to start with the headliner in Canelo and then get into some of the other ones. You got tonight in Times Square, Ryan Garcia and Rolly Romero. What's the appeal of this fight with Garcia?
I think it's interesting because within that matchup, you have a fighter in Ryan Garcia who has massive star power, massive commercial appeal. He has millions and millions of followers on his social media. And in this day and age, for so long, we have seen the best maybe avoid the best. And Ryan Garcia is one of the exceptions where he will go up against the best competition. And if he fails, well, he failed trying to be great. And he's already faced Gervonta Tank Davis. He has faced Devin Haney, who was also on this card. Those are some stars in the sport of boxing. And for Ryan Garcia, he is going up against a fighter in Rolly Romero who comes to win for sure. Doesn't really have the best defense. He is going to be swinging hard. He has some impactful shots that he can land. So I don't know if this one will go to the judges' scorecard either. And I think it sets up a chance for Ryan Garcia to really put on a show and stop it in a great way. And that gives the fans what they want. Now, you have Devin Haney fighting right before him. Haney and Garcia fought at a sold-out Barclays Center in Brooklyn about a year ago. And it was looked at as a 50-50 fight, star versus star. Ryan Garcia put Devin Haney down 3 times in that fight. Haney came back from each knockdown, but he lost a decision to Ryan Garcia. It was only a few days after that Ryan Garcia was tested positive for a banned substance, I believe, called Osterin. And that fight by the New York State Athletic Commission was ruled a no contest. So, it didn't count on paper, but it's still burning pretty hard in the minds of boxing fans. So they know that Garcia won there. Garcia is a kind of I don't want to say polarizing, but his mental health has been called into question. The last several years, he's had his issues with mental health. He's thankfully looked healthier in that regard, and he sounded healthier. But leading up to that fight against Devin Haney, I think there was some serious concern about the well-being of Ryan Garcia. So that led all the way into fight night. And then for Ryan Garcia to kind of pull off a rope-a-dope with the public, the boxing public, and show everyone that he was stable and that he knocked down Devin Haney, an undisputed champion in his own right, 3 times and won. That was a big statement. I think it added to his star power. But it looks that Ryan Garcia is in a great place mentally going into this weekend. And again, you have Haney fighting right underneath. And just like Canelo Crawford, the big speculation is that if both fighters get through their fights Friday night, they will meet up later this year as well.
How about Teofimo Lopez? I know he's the guy that beat Lomachenko, right? And then he went out the next time, and I think he lost. Is that correct?
Yes, that's exactly what happened. I would say of the 3 main headliners on this Friday night card in Times Square: Garcia, Haney, Teofimo Lopez. Teofimo Lopez probably has the most impressive win on his resume between all 3 fighters, and that is the match in which he took the titles away from Vasily Lomachenko. And like you mentioned, the very next fight happened in November of 2021. George Kambosos from Australia, he came out, put Teofimo Lopez down in the first round, ended up winning it by decision, taking the titles away from Teofimo Lopez. Lopez has built himself back up. He is the current WBO 140-pound champion. And I think he has probably the greatest career potential just in terms of raw ability out of those three headliners. So he's in probably the toughest fight out of all three as he takes on Arnold Barboza, who's a really good fighter. He's a champion. And that is the only fight on that. This speaks to the star power of the fighters involved in this Times Square show. That fight, which is going to go on second, there's the first fight featuring a Japanese phenom who's going to be making his pro debut. But the headliners are those three fighters like we keep mentioning. But Teofimo Lopez, Arnold Barboza is the only world title fight on this Times Square card. So it's super interesting that that's going on before the Haneys and the Garcias go at it.
Well, when I heard that there was going to be boxing in Times Square, I was thinking Cookie Monster versus Elmo with those stupid mascots that they got walking around all the time. So it's good that they cleared all them out just for a boxing match. If nothing else, even if the boxing's terrible this weekend, just to get rid of those stupid mascots in Times Square is a plus for sure.
They probably have to pay him about $1 to get him out of there, right?
Which Lopez do you think we get this time? Because I mean, it seems like there's a pretty wide variance in his career.
I think we get a determined Lopez. I think we have a focused Lopez. I think he has a good head on his shoulders here. I think losing to Kambosos, he had a close decision as well to a fighter by the name of Jermaine Ortiz after that. Look, it wouldn't shock me if Arnold Barboza comes away victorious, but I would go with the chalk pick here in Teofimo Lopez.
All right, now Sunday in Vegas, you get the Japanese monster Inoue. He's a superstar, as you said, in Japan already. A champ in 2 divisions. He's got like a 10-fight knockout streak. Tremendous power, but I don't know if the outside of the diehard fan, certainly not the casual fan, I don't know that his name resonates as of yet. How important is it for him to have a big performance in a time zone that North America can see for him to kind of start to make that crossover into the name appeal?
You hit it right there at the end. I'm tired of waking up at 5 a.m. To watch Naoya Inoue perform as he sells out the Tokyo Dome in Japan, which he's done countless times now. This is a chance for the American fans to be able to watch, whether it's live in person or at a reasonable hour on ESPN, arguably the top pound-for-pound fighter in the sport. Naoya Inoue, you mentioned the knockout power. He has the power. He has speed. He has ring IQ. And I mentioned the comparisons to Shohei Ohtani. I mean, in Japan, Ohtani's 1. Inoue is 1A. Naoya Inoue was there when the Dodgers opened up the season against the Cubs. He is widely recognized in the sport of Japan. He's fought in America before, but his star has just risen to this pound-for-pound level since then. And it's just an opportunity for American fans to watch greatness. And I hope they don't pass it up here.
It feels like boxing has a ton of talent now, even though the sport is not what it was in the 70s and 80s, but it feels tougher than ever to make the big fights in a timely fashion. And that's always kind of been an issue here for the last 10, 20 years, it feels like, to the casual fan. What needs to happen so that we get these big fights in a time frame where the audience is ready to go?
Well, I would argue, Gordon, that the tide is turning in that regard. And we have seen that in the last 2 years or so, mainly. Look, let's be completely candid here. Mainly because of one person, and his name is Turki Al-Sheikh. He is the chairperson of Saudi Arabia's General Entertainment Authority, and that is the main reason why you are seeing Canelo Alvarez go fight in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia this Saturday. Naoya Inoue has some type of, it's kind of murky, but he has some type of deal with Riyadh season and the Saudi Arabia General Entertainment Authority. All of these fighters are slowly but surely going to Saudi Arabia. This Times Square event is spearheaded by the Ring magazine, which is controlled by Turki Al-Sheikh now. So he has come into the sport. He's shaking things up a bit. Look, the big reason why it's happening now, the dream matches are being made. The reason why it's happening, it's because the money's there. And as long as that's happening, I think you're going to see more and more of the matches that we have been seeing in the last 2 years or so, the matches that the hardcore fan has been craving. Last weekend, look, what I'm saying here is it doesn't have to just be in Saudi Arabia for it to work. It led an event last weekend at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium in England. 67,000 fans are on hand to watch Conor Benn fight Chris Eubank Jr. And look, that's an anomaly because both their fathers were terrific fighters. They had a nasty rivalry, and now it's trickled down to their sons. So there's a lot of storylines there that are so compelling. But bottom line is 67,000 flooded into Tottenham Hotspur. Big time events, dream matchups. Yes, they're happening in Saudi Arabia, but they're happening, Gordon. And that's all that really matters. Canelo Crawford will happen in September. These fights that are lined up for Times Square, they're highly competitive, very entertaining fights. Yes, there's a favorite, but there's a favorite in every fight. It could lead again to a Ryan Garcia, Devin Haney rematch. So in July, you're going to have the undisputed heavyweight champion of the world, Alexander Usyk, going up against Daniel Dubois. That is the best fight to make at the moment in the heavyweight division. Yeah, there's no big American power at the heavyweight division right now, but that stuff is cyclical. If you want to see the best matchups occur, they are happening right now. So boxing's pretty hot. I would argue to say at this moment, it's hotter than the UFC. Again, I think it is all cyclical, but the reason why it probably has leapfrogged UFC in this moment is because everything's different. Like I just said, there's an event in Times Square in New York on Saturday. Then you have Canelo Alvarez, the name that everybody knows in sport. He's fighting in Saudi Arabia. You have these wild ideas that are coming together. Tottenham Stadium, there's talk about staging an event at Alcatraz in the next year or so. So these things are happening, and it's a big reason why I think there's been a resurgence of boxing. Now it's just about capturing the casual public's attention, and I think you do it with events that are happening this weekend.
We're talking with Justin Shackil, of course, about everything boxing this weekend. But of course, if we're talking with Justin, I can't let you go without asking some about the Yankees. It's very early on in the season. A lot of changes in the offseason with no Juan Soto. How do you feel like the Yankees are sitting here as we start to hit the month of May?
Let me preface anything I'm saying by saying it is a long season. So
it's amazing. Everybody every year forgets how long a baseball season is.
It is. 1 month can be negated by a great following month, a poor following month. I said that to myself a month ago. Hey, it's a long season, so brace yourselves. But I think, look, the Yankees offense has definitely exceeded expectations. I think collectively it's as strong as it probably could be. Aaron Judge is just a monster of all monsters at the moment. He recorded 2 hits in a game a couple of nights ago, and his average actually went down. That's how great he has been. I think the type of production the Yankees received from first base the last several years just accentuates what Paul Goldschmidt has done. I think the question of what would third base look like going into spring training, so far, Oswaldo Cabrera has acquitted himself. I know he's had some defensive miscues, but offensively, they're getting more out of that position than they have in years past. I think the big question mark, I guess, is Cody Bellinger, and the way he was swinging in spring training, you didn't think that was going to be an issue. That kind of offsets the nice performance that you've been seeing from Jason Dominguez, who had a ton of question marks going into spring training. So all that stuff is going to even itself out. I'm always going to be conscious of the fact that this is a starting rotation that is not at full health. And you're not going to obviously be at full health with Garrett Cole out for the entire season. But Max Fried has filled the void of ace very nicely. Carlos Rodon has largely stepped up in year 3. It just feels like he's becoming more and more comfortable. I am focused on the rest of that rotation. Will Warren, Carlos Carrasco, both starting 2 times in a 3-day period. I wonder what that does to a bullpen that has looked strong so far. But again, it's early. You don't want to overwork them. I think for the long run, they need another arm in that rotation. I think they need it from the outside. They're going to get one back in Luis Gil at some point, but I think they just need to add to their starting pitching. Bottom line, though, I didn't think the AL East, and again, it's only 1 month, I didn't think the AL East was going to be as down as it's looked over the first month of the season. So yes, that can change, but if it doesn't, this is a fairly easy path to a division title for the Yankees, and they can't afford to give up any games to maybe put that in question.
You mentioned the name Aaron Judge. His greatness, it seems like every year he does something to make him greater than he was the year before, and he was already great the year before. You get to see him up close, and he is by far the biggest star in the New York sports landscape right now. What does the average fan not know about Aaron Judge?
I think it's his ability to force everyone around him to perform at a higher level. And I think it extends outside the clubhouse. And maybe that's a corny way to think about it for what I do. I've been fortunate enough to call a lot of his games over the last couple of years, but for whatever reason, it hit me a couple of years ago that I am absolutely watching an all-time great. Already knew he was a terrific player, but all-time great is just another category, right? So it hit me then. And then last year, what he'd been doing, it actually compelled me to go and say this to him. I go, hey, I have been fortunate enough to watch and call action for some of the best athletes between Kevin Durant when he was with the Nets, with Canelo Alvarez, and I said, and with you. Those are the three top athletes that I've been blessed to call the action for. And with a guy like Kevin Durant and with a guy like Aaron Judge, it's almost as if you can sit back and just wait for something spectacular to happen. But when it does, you need to be ready to do your job. And it forces you to reach another level in whatever you're doing. So for me, broadcast booth, okay. For the scouting team that travels with the team, it forces them to be on their A game all the time. The training staff, the strength and conditioning staff, I think it forces them to just be at a higher level. So imagine what it's like to be a teammate of his. And I told him, don't just think that your impact is confined to these clubhouse walls. They're not. He really appreciated that, but I really do believe that is the case. I think he affects the entire staff, the entire product of game day, because you want to try and match it. You want to give your all, and he forces you to lock in and do that.
Yeah, look, and when you're making the salary that he's making, he's a great player, and his salary is warranted based on just how good of a player he is. But whenever you're composing a team, I would think that you're trying to find value in any way that you can. And the fact that he can have that impact off the field with teammates, in the community, within the organization, that makes it almost a bargain for the Yankees.
100%. In many ways, I think he's underpaid.
Marketing for a sports team? Can't quite think of a way to engage loyal fans as much as you would like? This is where a .vote web address comes in. Allow for fans to help decide player of the game, player of the week, or MVP of a season. There are hundreds of ways you can conduct polls for fan engagement that benefits both the organization and the fan base. Visit www.godaddy.com and purchase www.yourteam.vote.
Time now for 3 and Out. And first up is the Giants' first-round draft pick, Abdul Carter and Lawrence Taylor. Abdul Carter, as you probably heard by now, reportedly reached out to Lawrence Taylor to ask, hey, any way I could borrow that iconic number 56, a number retired by the Giants, retired, as in don't touch it, genuflect when you see it, and move on. Now listen, this is not unprecedented. Last year, Malik Neighbors got permission to wear Ray Flaherty's number 1 with the Giants, and that's cool. Flaherty's family was fine with it, and Flaherty has not played since the 1930s. No one under 90 remembers Ray Flaherty seeing him live. You maybe can get away with that, but Abdul Carter, he went after LT, the single most iconic player in franchise history. The reason that left tackles became millionaires, the guy who revolutionized the position. So he was not just asking, hey, can I borrow your number? He's kind of asking to borrow a legacy. And here's the wild part. Carter certainly has a team, right? Agents, advisors, PR folks. And somehow not one person stopped him and said, hey, maybe don't ask the greatest defensive player in NFL history to unretire his number for you. It's like watching Seinfeld when George shows up dripping strawberries on Babe Ruth's uniform. He was trying to get fired. Imagine being that out of touch. And here's the thing, LT did him a massive favor by saying no, because if the Giants had allowed that to go on, the moment that Carter missed a tackle or blew a coverage, the headlines would have written themselves. Why would you want that kind of unnecessary attention before you even played a game? And it shows you something bigger. Athletes today have more access to information, more support than ever, more branding advice than ever before. But sometimes they still need someone on their team to say, hey, man, maybe don't do that. I saw a report a couple of days ago when Roki Sasaki was looking for a free agent deal. He wanted, among other things, for Japanese-style toilets to be part of his MLB negotiations, which is the level of detail you expect from a pro athlete who is well supported. That makes sense. Asking for LT's number is just absolutely tone deaf. Now, you might say, there's no harm in asking. Maybe, but asking tells me everything I need to know. It tells me no one in the room was really thinking. All right, number 2, Giannis and the Halliburton family in the clown show in Indiana the other night. If Giannis Antetokounmpo had walked over and decked John Halliburton after that stunt at the end of the Bucks-Pacers series, I would not have blamed him for a single second. Violence is not the answer. Sometimes it could be the answer. And if it's not the answer, it's at least understandable, because what Halliburton pulled, that was not gamesmanship. That was not passion. That was flat out clown behavior, a complete embarrassment. And sure, he apologized, but that wasn't really remorse. That was damage control. So there's talk of punishment, league fines, or discipline, maybe a strongly worded memo. I think this is not a job so much for Adam Silver. This is a job for James Dolan's security crew. The guys who use facial recognition to keep people out of the garden, put them on it, because if the NBA had one of those guys working Pacers home games, this does not happen. Halliburton's sitting in the locker room wondering what went wrong. And this was not just a split-second mistake. This was dragged out. It was petty. It was unprofessional. It crossed the line into something that could have and probably should have turned physical. I think just about any other superstar would have responded with violence. As a parent, I think your number one job is you never want to embarrass your kid. And what Halliburton's father did, a grown man, did exactly that on national TV. And for what? Attention. And the other part of this is, of course, Milwaukee's future and Giannis's future. He's now, 30 years old? Dame Lillard is out next year. That window for another championship is closing fast, if not closed already. So now the talk is going to start about where he's going. And the NBA regular season is flawed. We've talked about that before. But the offseason in the NBA is phenomenal. And if Giannis even breathes the word, I want out, or unhappy here, phones around the league are going to light up. And then finally, good to see Jeff Ulbrich back in the headlines, huh? That after his son was the one who has been exposed as the person that pranked Shedeur Sanders on draft day. It took the NFL all of about 30 seconds to track that one down. Falcons fined $250,000. Jeff was fined $100,000. I can tell you right now, if my actions when I was 21 years old resulted in my father losing $100,000, I would not have turned 22 years old. I would have changed my identity on the spot and lived on the run for the rest of my life. If he would have caught me, there would have been a headstone in the backyard. Where's Gordon? Oh, he's still in the backyard. The other part of this is when you first heard this story, you figured, the kid's probably 12, 13, doing something stupid. Jax is exactly 2 years younger than Shedeur Sanders. So you don't get to blame the recklessness of youth on this one. And the problem with a prank, any prank, is it has to be actually funny. And I don't see how this is funny to toy with someone's emotions in a moment like that. The Jerky Boys, they were funny. This was super lame. All right, that's going to do it for another edition of Gordon Damer on Sports. First off, you've made it all the way to the end. I love you for it. Do me just one more favor. However you're listening to this episode, however you're listening to this podcast, if it's Apple, if it's Spotify, whatever, hit some buttons. Like the episode, love the episode, rate the episode, comment, whatever you can possibly do. Do it. I love you for it. We'll be back next week with a fresh edition of Gordon Damer on Sports.